Insensitive millionaire sees little girl make his daughter in a wheelchair laugh, and what he says changes his life. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. The 42nd floor of Mitchell Financial Tower stood like a glass monument to Robert Mitchell's ruthless ambition. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the December Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly, each building representing another conquest, another fortune amassed through calculated precision and heartless efficiency. Robert sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing quarterly projections that would make most CEOs weep with envy. At 52, he had built an empire worth $3.7 billion, yet the man staring back from his reflection looked hollow, carved from ice and corporate steel. "Mr. Mitchell, Mr." His assistant Sarah Chen knocked softly on the door. "Your daughter's physical therapy session was cancelled today. The therapist called in sick." Robert barely glanced up from his laptop screen. "Fine. Have Maria handle it." "Sir, Maria requested the afternoon off for her daughter's school play. Should I call the backup nanny service?" "Whatever costs less." His fingers continued typing, dismissing both his assistant and the conversation about his 8-year-old daughter Emma with the same cold efficiency he applied to business deals. Sarah hesitated in the doorway. "Mr. Mitchell, Emma specifically asked if you might be able to spend some time with her today. It's been 3 weeks since you've been home before her bedtime." The typing stopped. Robert's jaw tightened, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Was it guilt? Regret? Whatever emotion threatened to surface was quickly buried beneath layers of practiced indifference. "I have the Henderson merger to finalize. Emma will be fine with her tutor and the household staff. That's what I pay them for." Sarah's expression softened with barely concealed disappointment. "Yes, sir." As the door closed behind her, Robert returned to his screen, but the numbers seemed to blur together. 2 years ago, everything had changed. Everything. Emma's accident, the one he still couldn't bring himself to think about in detail, had left his vibrant, dancing daughter confined to a wheelchair. The doctors said she might walk again with years of therapy and determination, but Emma had retreated into herself, speaking only when necessary, her once bright eyes now holding shadows that broke something deep inside him. So Robert had done what he always did when faced with problems he couldn't solve through money or intimidation. He buried himself deeper in work, staying later at the office, traveling more frequently, hiring the best specialists money could buy while keeping his own heart safely locked away. His phone buzzed. A text from his housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Emma asking for you again. She's been sitting by the window all morning." Robert stared at the message for a full minute before deleting it without responding. He couldn't face Emma's disappointed eyes, couldn't bear to see his failure as a father reflected in her wheelchair, in the way she flinched whenever he entered a room. It was easier to stay away, to convince himself that providing for her financially was enough. The intercom crackled. "Mr. Mitchell, there's a situation in the lobby. Security is requesting your authorization to remove someone from the premises." "Handle it," Robert replied curtly. "Sir, it's Elena Vasquez. She works in building maintenance. She's asking to speak with you personally about her employment status. She has her daughter with her." Robert's mood darkened further. Elena Vasquez, the cleaning woman who had been increasingly late to work, requesting schedule changes, asking for advances on her salary. He'd been meaning to terminate her employment for weeks. Now seemed like the perfect time to eliminate another inefficiency from his life. Send them up. 10 minutes later, Eleanor stood in his office clutching the hand of a small girl with dark curls and enormous brown eyes. The child wore a faded purple winter coat that had seen better years, and her sneakers were held together with tape and hope. Despite her worn appearance, she possessed an energy that seemed to fill the sterile office with unexpected warmth. "Mr. Mitchell," Elena began, her voice trembling slightly with nervousness. "I know I've been having some scheduling issues, but my daughter Lucy has been having problems at school, and the aftercare program she was in lost their funding. I've been trying to find alternative childcare, but everything costs more than I make in a week. I was hoping we could work out some arrangement where Ms. Vasquez," Robert interrupted, his voice cutting through her explanation like a blade. Your personal problems are not my concern. Your job performance has been consistently subpar. I'm terminating your employment effective immediately." The color drained from Elena's face. "Please, Mr. Mitchell, I'm a good worker. I just need a little flexibility. My husband is deployed overseas with the army, and Lucy is all I have here. If you could just give me another chance, security will escort you out." Robert was already reaching for his phone. "You'll receive your final paycheck within the week." But as he spoke, something extraordinary happened. The little girl, Lucy, stepped forward, her chin raised with remarkable courage for someone so small. "Excuse me, mister," she said, her voice clear and confident, despite the tears threatening in her eyes. "My mama is the best cleaner in the whole world. She makes everything sparkle, even broken things. She's been taking care of me all by herself since Daddy went to fight the bad guys, and she never ever gives up on anything." Robert found himself actually looking at the child for the first time. There was something about her, a fierce loyalty, an unshakable faith in her mother that he found both admirable and irritating. "That's very touching," he replied coldly. "But business decisions aren't made based on sentiment." Lucy studied his face with the intensity only children possess, as if she could see straight through his expensive suit into the empty spaces where his heart should be. "You look really sad," she observed matter-of-factly. "Like you lost something important and can't remember where you put it." The observation hit Robert like a physical blow. For a moment, the carefully constructed walls around his emotions wavered, but then his training kicked in. Never show weakness, never let anyone see behind the armor. "Ms. Vasquez, take your daughter and leave now." As Elena led Lucy toward the door, the little girl turned back one more time. "I hope you find what you lost, mister. Maybe it's closer than you think." The door closed behind them, leaving Robert alone in his pristine office. But somehow, the silence felt different now, heavier, more hollow. He tried to return to his work, but Lucy's words echoed in his mind. "You look really sad, like you lost something important." What had he lost? Everything that mattered, apparently. His wife Sarah had died giving birth to Emma, leaving him to raise their daughter alone. He'd thrown himself into work to avoid the grief, convinced that financial security was the best way to honor Sarah's memory and protect Emma's future. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten how to be a father, how to be human. The intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Mitchell, your car is ready for the trip home." For the first time in months, Robert found himself actually considering going home early. Maybe he could have dinner with Emma, read her a story, try to bridge the gulf that had grown between them. But as he reached for his coat, his phone rang. The Henderson merger, of course. By the time he finished the call, it was well past Emma's bedtime, and the moment of possibility had passed like so many others before it. That night, lying in his king-sized bed in his empty penthouse, Robert couldn't shake the image of Lucy's determined face or the way she'd defended her mother with such fierce love. When was the last time Emma had looked at him that way? When was the last time anyone had? 3 days later, Robert was working late again when he heard something that stopped him cold, the sound of laughter echoing through the empty halls of Mitchell Financial Tower. Not just any laughter, but the clear, delighted giggling of children. It was nearly 8 p.m. The building should have been deserted except for security and the occasional workaholic executive. Curiosity overruled his usual indifference, and Robert found himself following the sound toward the private elevator that led to his penthouse apartment. As the doors opened on the 43rd floor residential level, the laughter grew louder, mixed with animated chatter and what sounded like, was that music? The sounds were coming from Emma's room. Robert moved quietly down the hallway, his heart beating with an unfamiliar mixture of confusion and something that might have been hope. Through the partially open door, he glimpsed a scene that stopped him in his tracks. Emma was sitting in her wheelchair in the center of her room, but for the first time in 2 years, she was leaning forward, animated, her face bright with genuine joy. And there, seated cross-legged on the floor beside her, was Lucy Vasquez, still wearing that same faded purple coat, her hands moving expressively as she told some elaborate story. "And then the dragon realized," Lucy was saying, her voice full of dramatic flair, "that he wasn't scary at all. He was just lonely because nobody ever wanted to be his friend. So the princess in the wheelchair, who was the bravest princess in all the kingdoms, she rolled right up to him and said, "Want to have a tea party?" Emma giggled, and Robert felt something crack inside his chest. How long had it been since he'd heard that sound? "But what about her legs?" Emma asked, her voice stronger than Robert had heard it in months. "Didn't the dragon think she was broken?" Lucy's expression grew serious and wise beyond her 7 years. "Oh no, Emma, see, that's what made her the bravest princess of all. She knew that being different didn't mean being broken. Her wheels were like magic, making her faster than all the walking princesses. The dragon thought that was the coolest thing ever." Robert leaned against the doorframe, transfixed. When had Elena brought her daughter back? How had Lucy gotten past security? And more importantly, how had she managed to do what teams of expensive therapists and specialists had failed to accomplish? Bring Emma back to life. "My daddy says I'm not broken either," Lucy continued, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand. "He says some people are just made different so they can teach the rest of us new ways to be strong." "Your daddy sounds smart," Emma replied softly. "He is. He's a soldier fighting bad guys far away. Mama says he's protecting people like you and me so we can have tea parties with dragons and not be scared." Robert's jaw tightened. Elena's husband was deployed military, information that should have made him more sympathetic to her situation, not less. Instead, he'd fired her without a second thought, probably leaving Lucy without stable housing or health care while her father risked his life serving their country. "Lucy," Emma's voice was hesitant, Do you think my daddy doesn't like me anymore? Because of my chair?" The question hit Robert like a sledgehammer. He gripped the doorframe, struggling to breathe as the full weight of his failures crashed down on him. Lucy was quiet for a moment, then spoke with the startling wisdom that seemed to come naturally to her. "I think sometimes grown-ups get really scared when people they love get hurt. They think if they stay far away it won't hurt so much, but that just makes everyone sad. So, what do I do? Maybe you could show him that you're still the same Emma inside. Like, what did you guys used to do together that made you both happy?" Emma's face lit up with memory. "We used to have dance parties before my accident. Daddy would play really loud music and spin me around, and we'd dance until we fell down laughing. He said I was the best dance partner in the world." "Then that's it." Lucy jumped to her feet with excitement. "We'll have a wheelchair dance party." "I bet your daddy forgot that dancing isn't just about legs. It's about heart." Before Robert could process what was happening, Lucy had grabbed Emma's hands and was gently pulling her wheelchair into motion, spinning her in slow circles around the room while humming a melody that sounded hauntingly familiar. It took him a moment to recognize it. "The Way You Look Tonight," the song he and his late wife Sarah had danced to at their wedding, the same song he used to play during those magical dance parties with baby Emma. Emma was laughing now, truly laughing, her arms extended like wings as Lucy spun her chair with careful precision. The sight was so beautiful, so pure, that Robert felt tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in years burning behind his eyes. That's when Emma spotted him in the doorway. The laughter died instantly. Emma's face went pale, and she pulled her arms close to her body, shrinking back into the shell she'd inhabited for the past 2 years. Lucy stopped spinning, following Emma's gaze to where Robert stood frozen in the hallway. "Daddy?" Emma's voice was small, frightened. "I'm sorry, we weren't being bad. Lucy was just—" "It's okay," Robert heard himself say, though his voice sounded strange and distant. I heard music. Lucy stepped protectively in front of Emma's wheelchair, her chin raised in that familiar gesture of fierce courage. "Don't be mad at Emma, mister. The dancing was my idea. If you're going to be mean to someone, be mean to me." The fact that this 7-year-old was prepared to shield his own daughter from his anger shamed Robert more than anything else could have. What kind of father had he become that his child needed protection from him? "I'm not angry," he said quietly. I didn't know we had a visitor." "Mama's cleaning the offices downstairs," Lucy explained, her posture still defensive. "She doesn't have anyone to watch me since you fired her, so she has to bring me to her other jobs. I promise I'm not breaking anything. Emma needed a friend, and I'm really good at being a friend." The simple statement carried so much weight that Robert felt his knees might give out. His daughter had needed a friend, something so basic, so fundamental, and he'd been too buried in spreadsheets and mergers to notice. "Lucy," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "would you mind if I talk to Emma alone for a minute?" Lucy looked to Emma for guidance. Emma nodded slowly, though her eyes remained wary. "I'll be right outside if you need me," Lucy whispered to Emma, then marched past Robert with the dignity of a queen, leaving father and daughter alone in the room that suddenly felt enormous and silent. Robert approached slowly, as if Emma might bolt at any sudden movement. He pulled up a chair, not his usual power position behind a desk, but at Emma's eye level, the way the parenting books he'd once read had recommended. "Emma," he began, then stopped, realizing he had no idea what to say to his own daughter. "I'm sorry I haven't been present. I know that's not enough, but I wanted you to know that it's not because of you. It's because of me." Emma studied his face with those dark eyes that looked so much like her mother's. "Are you ashamed of me, Daddy?" The question knocked the breath from his lungs. "God, no, Emma, no, I'm ashamed of me. Then why don't you want to be around me anymore?" Robert felt something breaking apart inside him, walls crumbling that he'd spent 2 years building. "Because every time I look at you, I remember that I failed to protect you. The night of your accident, I was working late. Again. Your mother always said I worked too much, that I was missing your childhood. But I thought I was doing the right thing, building security for our family. And then?" He couldn't finish the sentence. The memory was still too raw. The phone call from the hospital, the race through dark streets, arriving to find his perfect little girl broken and unconscious, her dance dreams shattered along with her spine. "The accident wasn't your fault, Daddy," Emma said quietly. "Wasn't it? If I'd been home, if I'd been the father you deserved instead of chasing another deal, another dollar. Lucy says, sometimes bad things just happen, even to good people. She says that's when we find out how brave we really are." Robert looked at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time in months. Despite everything she'd endured, despite his emotional abandonment, she was still trying to comfort him. Where had this wisdom come from? This strength? "Lucy seems like a very smart girl," he said softly. For the first time in their conversation, Emma smiled. "She is. She knows lots of stories. And she says being in a wheelchair makes me special, not broken. She says I can do anything I set my mind to, just maybe in a different way than other people." "She's right," Robert whispered, finally saying the words he should have said 2 years ago. "You're not broken, Emma. You're perfect exactly as you are." "I'm the one who's broken." Emma reached out tentatively and touched his hand. "Maybe Lucy can help fix you too, Daddy. She's really good at fixing things." The following morning brought unexpected chaos to Mitchell Financial Tower. Robert arrived at his office to find his assistant Sarah Chen waiting with an expression of barely contained panic. "Mr. Mitchell, we have a situation," she began, clutching a tablet loaded with what appeared to be news articles. "There's been a story published about yesterday's events. Someone recorded video of you and Emma." Robert's blood turned to ice. "What kind of video?" "It appears to be security footage from the hallway outside your penthouse. Someone leaked it to Channel 7 News, and it's already been picked up by the major networks." Sarah handed him the tablet, her face pale. "Sir, I think you need to see this." The headline read, "Billionaire CEO caught in emotional moment with disabled daughter." Below it, grainy security footage showed Robert kneeling beside Emma's wheelchair, both of them crying, with Lucy standing guard in the background like a tiny sentinel. Robert's hands shook as he scrolled through the article. The story painted him as a cold corporate giant who had been ignoring his disabled daughter until a 7-year-old girl taught him about love and family. While technically accurate, seeing his most vulnerable moment broadcast to the world felt like having his soul stripped naked in Times Square. "How many views?" he asked through gritted teeth. 3.2 million and climbing. It's trending on every social media platform. The phones haven't stopped ringing. Interview requests, documentary proposals, book deals. Everyone wants to know about the miracle girl who melted the Ice King's heart. Robert closed his eyes, feeling the familiar walls slamming back into place around his emotions. This was exactly why he kept his private life private, why he never showed weakness or vulnerability. The moment you let people see behind the armor, They turned your pain into entertainment. Find out who leaked the footage. I want them prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Sir, there's more. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. They've identified Lucy and her mother. Reporters are camped outside their apartment building. Elena Vasquez is being hounded for interviews about her daughter's magical healing powers. The rage that filled Robert was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was one thing to exploit his private moments, but dragging a 7-year-old child and her struggling mother into a media circus crossed every line imaginable. Get Eleanor on the phone. Now. I've been trying, sir. Her number's been disconnected. According to building management, she and Lucy vacated their apartment early this morning. No forwarding address. Robert stared out his office windows at the Manhattan skyline, his mind racing. Eleanor had probably panicked when the reporters showed up, grabbing Lucy and running to God knows where. They could be anywhere in the city or beyond, with no money, no support, and nowhere safe from the media feeding frenzy his moment of humanity had unleashed. Sir, Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. Emma's tutor called. She's been asking for Lucy all morning. Should I explain the situation? Absolutely not. Robert's response was sharp, protective. Emma doesn't need to know about any of this. Double security at the penthouse and make sure no one gets through to her without my explicit authorization. As Sarah left to handle the logistics, Robert found himself staring at the frozen image on the tablet screen, Lucy's fierce little face, positioned protectively between him and Emma. The girl who had somehow cracked open his frozen heart in the span of 3 days was now being hunted by news crews desperate for their next human interest story. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Mitchell, this is Elena. Lucy and I are safe, but we can't come back. I'm sorry for all the trouble. Please tell Emma that Lucy will never forget their friendship. E.V. Robert read the message 3 times, each word hitting him like a physical blow. They were gone. Lucy, the tiny miracle worker who had brought his daughter back to life, who had shown him what he'd been missing in his relentless pursuit of financial success, was gone, and it was his fault. He thought about Emma, probably sitting by her window right now, waiting for her first real friend in 2 years to return. How was he supposed to explain that Lucy wouldn't be coming back, that his failure to protect their privacy had driven away the one person who could reach through Emma's walls? The intercom crackled with his security chief's voice. Mr. Mitchell, there are approximately 30 reporters in the lobby demanding statements about the Miracle Girl story. How would you like us to proceed? Robert closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. He could have the security team clear them out, issue a standard no comment through his PR firm, and wait for the story to die down. That was the safe choice, the corporate choice, the choice that protected his empire and his privacy. But as he sat in his pristine office, surrounded by the monuments to his success, all he could think about was Lucy's question from that first day. You look really sad. Like you lost something important and can't remember where you put it. He had lost something important, his humanity, his connection to what truly mattered. And now, because of his coldness, his pride, his inability to simply be a decent human being to a struggling mother and her extraordinary daughter, he'd lost them too. Sir? The security chief was waiting for instructions. Robert stared at the tablet screen, at the image of Lucy standing guard over Emma's wheelchair, with the fierce loyalty of someone who understood that love wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about showing up, about staying, about fighting for the people you cared about, even when the whole world seemed determined to tear them apart. Maybe it was time to learn that lesson himself. Send them up, he said quietly. Excuse me, sir. The reporters. Send them up to my office, all of them. Mr. Mitchell, are you certain that's... I said, send them up. Robert's voice carried the steel that had built his empire, but this time it was tempered with something new, purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins or quarterly projections. If the media wanted a story about the miracle girl who had changed his life, then by God they were going to get one. But they were going to get the truth, about Lucy's courage, about Elena's sacrifice, about what real strength looked like when it came in a 7-year-old package with pigtails and a purple coat held together with tape and hope. And maybe, if he was very lucky, somewhere out there in the chaos of New York City, a little girl with enormous brown eyes would see his words and know that some grown-ups could learn, could change, could finally understand that the most important things in life couldn't be bought or sold. They could only be earned through love. The elevator doors opened, and 30 hungry reporters flooded into Robert Mitchell's perfectly ordered world. For the first time in his corporate life, he welcomed the chaos, because Lucy had taught him that sometimes the most beautiful things grew in the midst of complete disaster. The press conference that followed would be remembered as one of the most unusual in corporate history. 30 seasoned reporters, accustomed to Robert Mitchell's icy corporate speak and calculated non-answers, found themselves sitting in stunned silence as the billionaire CEO did something unprecedented. He told the truth. "You want to know about the miracle girl?" Robert began, standing behind his mahogany desk but somehow appearing smaller, more human than the imposing figure they'd expected. "Her name is Lucy Vasquez, and she's 7 years old. 3 days ago, I fired her mother Elena from her cleaning job in this building. Not because she was a bad employee, but because her personal problems, caring for Lucy while her husband serves our country overseas, interfered with my definition of efficiency." The room was dead silent, except for the scratching of pens and the soft whir of recording devices. "Lucy came to my office with her mother to plead for Elena's job. And when I coldly dismissed them both, this 7-year-old child looked me in the eye and told me I looked sad, like I'd lost something important and couldn't remember where I put it." Robert's voice cracked slightly. She was right. I had lost something. My humanity, my connection to my own daughter, my understanding of what truly matters in this world. A reporter from CNN raised her hand. "Mr. Mitchell, can you tell us about your daughter Emma? The footage shows her in a wheelchair." "My daughter Emma is 8 years old and uses a wheelchair following an accident 2 years ago. Since that accident, I've hidden from her pain by burying myself in work, convincing myself that financial provision was sufficient parenting. I was wrong." Robert paused, gathering strength for what came next. Emma hadn't laughed in 2 years. She barely spoke. She lived in a shadow of her former self because her father was too much of a coward to face his own failures. "And Lucy changed that," pressed a reporter from the Washington Post. "In one afternoon, Lucy did what teams of expensive specialists couldn't accomplish. She saw past Emma's wheelchair to the brave, wonderful girl underneath. She told Emma stories about princesses in wheelchairs being the strongest of all, about being different, meaning being special, not broken. She gave my daughter back her laughter, her hope, her belief that she was worthy of friendship and love." The reporters were scribbling frantically now, but Robert could see something shifting in their expressions. This wasn't the cold corporate damage control they'd expected. This was raw human emotion from a man coming to terms with his own failures. "Mr. Mitchell," called out a reporter from the New York Times, "where are Lucy and her mother now?" "Neighbors report they left their apartment this morning." Robert's jaw tightened with visible anguish. "They're in hiding because of this media circus. Elena Vasquez is a hard-working single mother whose husband is deployed in Afghanistan. She's been struggling to make ends meet while caring for Lucy alone. And now, because someone leaked private security footage of my family, they're being hunted by news crews, desperate for their next human interest story." He leaned forward, his voice gaining strength and steel. "Lucy is not a miracle girl for your entertainment. She's a 7-year-old child who showed me what courage looks like. Defending her mother with fierce loyalty, befriending my daughter without judgment, seeing good in a man who had forgotten how to be good himself. She deserves protection, not exploitation." "So what happens now?" asked a reporter from ABC News. Robert was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the faces before him. These people had the power to shape how this story was told, to either continue the harmful narrative that had driven Lucy and Elena into hiding, or to help him make amends for his failures. "Now I'm going to do something I should have done days ago," he said finally. "I'm going to find Elena and Lucy and make things right. Elena is hereby reinstated to her position with full back pay, benefits, and flexible scheduling that accommodates her needs as a military spouse. Lucy will have access to the best childcare and educational resources money can provide. And if anyone continues to harass this family for interviews or photos, they'll find themselves facing the full legal resources of Mitchell Financial. The room erupted with questions, but Robert raised his hand for silence. "There's something else you need to understand," he continued, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "For the past 2 years, I've measured my worth in dollars, market shares, and quarterly projections. I told myself that success meant being the richest, most powerful man in any room. But a 7-year-old girl with a worn purple coat taught me that real success is measured in laughter shared, in moments of connection, in the courage to love, despite the risk of loss." He paused, thinking of Emma waiting at home, probably watching the window for a friend who might never return. "The truth is, I'm not the hero of this story. Lucy is, a child living in poverty who chose kindness over bitterness, who saw potential where I saw problems, who loved without condition or expectation of reward. If you want a miracle story, there it is, not that she changed me, but that she chose to try despite having every reason not to." As the reporters filed out, chattering excitedly about the unexpected turn their story had taken, Robert found himself alone in his office with a new kind of silence. Not the empty quiet of isolation he'd grown accustomed to, but the purposeful stillness of a man preparing for the most important mission of his life. He had to find Lucy and Eleanor. He had to make amends not just with words, but with actions that proved he'd learned the lessons Lucy had tried to teach him. And most importantly, he had to do it not for the media, not to salvage his reputation, but because somewhere in the heart he'd forgotten he possessed, a 7-year-old girl with extraordinary wisdom had planted a seed of hope that was finally beginning to grow. His assistant Sarah appeared in the doorway, holding a phone with an expression of carefully contained excitement. "Mr. Mitchell, I have Elena Vasquez on the line." Robert's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the phone. "Elena, are you and Lucy safe?" "We're okay, Mr. Mitchell," came the quiet reply. "We saw your press conference. Lucy wanted me to call. Where are you? I need to see you both to apologize properly to—" "Mr. Mitchell," Elena interrupted gently, "there's something you need to know. Something about Lucy that changes everything." The tone in her voice sent ice through Robert's veins. "What do you mean? Can you meet us at Mount Sinai Hospital, room 412? And Mr. Mitchell, please hurry." The line went dead, leaving Robert staring at the phone with a growing sense of dread. Mount Sinai Hospital, room 412. The implications hit him like a freight train, and suddenly his legs wouldn't support his weight. Lucy, brave, wonderful, miraculous Lucy, was in the hospital. And somehow Robert knew with terrible certainty that this was the piece of the puzzle he'd been missing. The reason behind Elena's scheduling problems, the source of Lucy's premature wisdom about loss and courage, and making every moment count. He was out of his office and running toward the elevator before his conscious mind had fully processed the information, driven by a desperate need to reach the little girl who had saved his soul, even as his own world threatened to crumble around him once again. Mount Sinai Hospital's pediatric ward carried the particular smell of antiseptic and hope that Robert remembered all too well from Emma's early days after her accident. His footsteps echoed down the polished corridors as he followed signs to room 412, his heart pounding with a dread that grew stronger with each step. He found Elena sitting in a plastic chair beside a hospital bed, her head bowed in exhaustion and worry. She looked up as he entered, her eyes red with tears she'd been trying not to shed. "Elena, what?" Robert began, then stopped short as his gaze fell on the small figure in the hospital bed. Lucy looked impossibly tiny, surrounded by monitoring equipment and IV tubes. Her vibrant energy had been replaced by a pale stillness that terrified him more than any corporate crisis ever had. But even in sleep, even diminished by whatever was ravaging her small body, she maintained that quality of inner strength that had first captivated him. "How long?" Robert whispered, sinking into the chair beside Elena. 6 months since the diagnosis," Elena replied, her voice barely audible. "Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The doctors say she has maybe 3 weeks left. The treatments aren't working anymore." The words hit Robert like physical blows. 3 weeks. This extraordinary child who had taught him what it meant to be human again had been fighting for her life. while he'd been worried about quarterly reports and media coverage. "Why didn't you tell me? When you came to my office asking for schedule flexibility, why didn't you explain?" Elena's laugh held no humor, only bitter exhaustion. "Would it have mattered? You were firing me regardless, and Lucy. She made me promise not to use her sickness to make people feel sorry for her. She said she wanted people to like her for who she was, not what was wrong with her." Robert felt something breaking apart inside his chest, a pain more acute than anything he'd experienced since Sarah's death. The scheduling problems, the missed days, hospital visits, treatment sessions, days when she was too weak to go to daycare. "I've been working 3 jobs trying to pay for her medications while Frank is deployed. The insurance doesn't cover everything, and the experimental treatments." Eleanor's voice trailed off into silence. "How much?" Robert asked, his corporate mind automatically calculating solutions. "How much do you need? I'll write a check right now, transfer funds, whatever it takes." But Eleanor was shaking her head sadly. "It's not about money anymore, Mr. Mitchell. We've tried everything. The doctors here, specialists at Memorial Sloan Kettering, even an experimental program in Houston. Her little body it can't fight anymore." As if summoned by their voices, Lucy stirred in the hospital bed, her dark eyes fluttering open. When she saw Robert, a weak smile crossed her pale features. "Hey, mister," she whispered, her voice fragile but still carrying that spark of warmth that had first captivated him. "Did you come to visit me?" Robert moved to her bedside, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Of course I did. I had to make sure you were okay." "I'm not okay," Lucy replied with the devastating honesty only children possess. "But that's not the important part. The important part is that I got to help Emma remember how to smile again, and maybe I helped you remember something too." Tears Robert hadn't allowed himself to shed in years began streaming down his face. "Lucy, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I was mean to your mama. Sorry I didn't understand. Sorry I wasted so much time being angry and scared." "It's okay," Lucy whispered, reaching out with remarkable effort to pat his hand. "Grown-ups forget sometimes that being scared doesn't mean you have to be mean. But you remembered, didn't you? You remembered how to love Emma." "Because of you," Robert choked out. "You saved us both." Lucy's smile grew a little brighter. "That makes me really happy. Emma's the best friend I ever had. Will you tell her something for me?" "Anything. Tell her that princesses in wheelchairs are still the bravest of all. And tell her that even when friends have to go away, the love stays forever. It lives in all the happy memories." Robert could barely speak through his tears. "Lucy, what if there was a way to help you? What if money could make a difference? Experimental treatments, the best doctors in the world." But Lucy was shaking her head with that same gentle wisdom that had first pierced through his defenses. "I already talked to the doctors, mister. Sometimes fighting just makes you more tired. But you know what? I'm not sad. I got to meet Emma, and I got to help fix your heart. That's a pretty good thing to do with 7 years, don't you think?" The simple acceptance in her voice, the complete lack of self-pity or bitterness, humbled Robert in ways that all his business failures never could. Here was a child facing the ultimate loss with more grace and courage than he'd shown in dealing with comparatively minor setbacks. "Lucy," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is there anything you want? Anything at all that would make you happy?" Lucy considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "Could Emma come visit me? I miss her. And maybe you could tell me about the dance parties you used to have with her. The ones with the loud music and the spinning." Robert's heart shattered completely. Even facing her own mortality, Lucy was thinking about Emma's happiness, wanting to hear stories that would bring joy to her friend. "We'll do better than that," he whispered, an idea forming through his grief. "We'll have a dance party right here. Emma can come and we'll play music and you can teach her new wheelchair dance moves." Lucy's eyes lit up with delight. "Really? In the hospital?" "I'll buy this whole floor if I have to," Robert promised, meaning every word. "We'll fill this room with music and laughter, and all the joy you've brought into our lives." As Lucy drifted back to sleep, Robert sat with Elena in the gathering dusk, both of them watching over the little girl who had given them more than she'd ever received in return. Outside the hospital windows, Manhattan pulsed with its relentless energy, Millions of people rushing through their lives unaware that in room 412, a 7-year-old was teaching 2 adults the most important lesson of all, that love isn't measured in years, but in moments that matter. "Elena," Robert said quietly, "I want you to know that whatever happens, you and Lucy will never have to worry about money again. Frank's service to our country, your sacrifice as a military family, Lucy's impact on my life, you've given me more than I could ever repay." Eleanor reached over and squeezed his hand. "She really loves Emma, you know. Talks about her all the time. Says Emma is going to do amazing things because brave people always do." Robert closed his eyes, thinking of his daughter waiting at home, probably still hoping her friend would return. Tomorrow, he would bring Emma here. They would have that dance party, fill this sterile room with music and laughter, and create memories that would have to last a lifetime. Because Lucy was right. Love lived in the happy memories, and it was time to make as many as possible while they still could. 2 days later, room 412 at Mount Sinai Hospital had been transformed into something that defied medical explanation. Robert had indeed bought out the entire pediatric floor, filling Lucy's room with flowers, balloons, and a sound system that would have made most nightclubs envious. More importantly, he'd arranged for Emma to spend the day with her best friend, along with a carefully selected group of nurses and doctors who understood that sometimes healing had nothing to do with medicine. Lucy was sitting up in bed, wearing a sparkly tiara that Elena had found in the hospital gift shop, while Emma sat beside her in her wheelchair, both girls giggling as Robert struggled to untangle a string of Christmas lights he'd insisted on hanging, despite it being early December. "Daddy, you're doing it wrong," Emma called out, her voice filled with more joy than Robert had heard in 2 years. "You have to start from the end, not the middle." "I'm an expert at corporate mergers, not Christmas decorations," Robert replied, earning another burst of laughter from both girls. "Maybe I should hire someone for this." "No way." Lucy protested weakly but firmly. "This is way more fun when grown-ups mess up. Plus, Emma's the best at fixing things. She fixed my heart when I was scared about the hospital." Robert paused in his struggle with the lights, looking at his daughter with new understanding. While he'd been drowning in guilt about Emma's limitations, she'd been quietly developing strengths he'd never recognized. Empathy, resilience, the ability to comfort others despite her own challenges. "Emma fixed your heart?" he asked softly. Lucy nodded enthusiastically. "When I first got here, I was really scared about all the machines and needles. But Emma told me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do important things even when you are scared. She said wheelchairs make you closer to the ground so you can see beautiful things other people miss, like flowers and puppy feet and little kid smiles." Emma blushed at the praise. "Lucy taught me that too. She said I was a princess even with my chair, remember?" "The bravest princess of all," Lucy confirmed, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand. "And you know what? I was right. You're the bravest person I know." As Robert finally managed to get the lights working, casting a warm glow over the room, Elena appeared in the doorway with a cake she'd somehow managed to have made, despite everything they were dealing with. It was shaped like a castle with 2 small figurines on top, a princess in a wheelchair and another princess with a sparkling crown. "I thought we should make this official," Elena announced, her voice carefully cheerful despite the circumstances. "A real princess party for the 2 most courageous girls in New York." The next few hours passed in a blur of music, laughter, and the kind of magical moments that happen when people choose joy despite overwhelming circumstances. Lucy, despite her weakness, insisted on teaching Robert how to do wheelchair dance moves, which mostly involved him spinning Emma's chair while Lucy conducted from her bed like a tiny orchestra leader. They played Emma's favorite songs, "The Way You Look Tonight," which brought tears to Robert's eyes as he remembered dancing to it with Sarah, and then with baby Emma in those precious moments before the accident. But this time, instead of the memory bringing only pain, it brought connection as Emma taught Lucy the hand movements they used to do during their living room dance parties. "This is the twirl move," Emma explained, demonstrating the graceful arm motions, while Lucy mimicked them from her hospital bed. "And this is the princess wave. You have to make your fingers flutter like butterfly wings." "I love it," Lucy exclaimed, her eyes bright with fever but shining with genuine happiness. "Your daddy must be the best dance partner ever." Robert felt his heart clench as he watched the two girls, understanding with painful clarity that this was likely their last dance party together. But instead of the crushing despair he might have expected, he felt something else: profound gratitude for this moment, this connection, this demonstration of love that transcended circumstances. As the afternoon wore on and Lucy began to tire, she asked for everyone to gather close. Robert and Elena sat on either side of her bed, with Emma's wheelchair positioned so she could hold Lucy's hand. "I want to tell you guys something important," Lucy said, her voice soft but clear. "I know I'm really sick and I know what that means. But I'm not sad because I got to have the best adventure ever. I got to meet Emma and help her remember how to laugh. I got to help Mr. Mitchell remember how to love his little girl, and I got to be friends with the bravest princess in the whole world." Emma was crying now, but she held Lucy's hand tightly. "You're my best friend forever, Lucy. Even when, I'll never forget you." "Good," Lucy whispered, her strength fading but her spirit undiminished. "And remember what I taught you. Being different makes you special, not broken. You're going to do amazing things, Emma. I can see it in your heart." She turned to Robert, her dark eyes still holding depths of wisdom that defied her 7 years. "And you, mister, you're going to be the best daddy ever now. You learned how to see with your heart instead of just your eyes. That's the most important thing anyone can learn." As the sun began to set outside the hospital windows, casting golden light across the makeshift dance floor they'd created, Lucy made one final request. "Can we have one more dance? All of us together?" Robert carefully lifted Lucy from her bed, supporting her fragile weight as Elena turned on the music one last time. Emma wheeled herself into position, and for several precious minutes, they moved together in the gentle rhythm of love made visible. Not the perfect choreography of professional dancers, but the sacred awkwardness of people choosing connection over fear, hope over despair, love over loss. Lucy passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by the flowers and laughter of their impromptu celebration. Her last words were about Emma, asking Robert to make sure her friend knew that princesses in wheelchairs were still the bravest of all. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people: military families Elena had met through support groups, hospital staff who had been touched by Lucy's courage, complete strangers who had heard the story and wanted to pay their respects to the little girl who had changed so many lives. But it was Emma who gave the eulogy that brought everyone to tears, speaking from her wheelchair with a strength and grace that would have made Lucy proud. "My friend Lucy taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared," Emma said, her young voice carrying clearly through the packed church. "It's about loving people even when you know it might hurt. She loved me even though she knew she had to leave. She loved my daddy even when he was being mean. She loved everyone because she understood something most grown-ups forget: that love is the only thing that really matters." As they left the cemetery that day, Emma reached for Robert's hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact since her accident. "Daddy?" she said quietly. "Yes, sweetheart. Can we have dance parties again? I think Lucy would want us to keep dancing." Robert squeezed his daughter's hand, feeling Lucy's presence in the warmth of Emma's touch, in the courage that allowed her to reach past her own grief to comfort others. "Every day if you want," he promised. "Lucy was right about a lot of things, but she was especially right about you. You are the bravest princess of all." 6 months later, the Lucy Vasquez Foundation for Military Families had raised over $50 million, providing support for children of deployed service members. Emma, now 9 and stronger than ever, served as the foundation's youngest board member, using her platform to advocate for children with disabilities and their families. Robert had restructured his entire corporation, implementing family-friendly policies and creating a childcare center in Mitchell Financial Tower. He kept normal business hours now, never missing another bedtime story or dance party. The business thrived under his new leadership approach. Turns out that companies run by people who understand what truly matters tend to attract the best employees and most loyal customers. Elena had returned to school with a full scholarship funded by the foundation, studying to become a pediatric nurse. Frank had completed his deployment and found work as a veterans counselor, helping other military families navigate the challenges of service and sacrifice. But perhaps most importantly, Emma had kept her promise to Lucy. She did do amazing things, not despite her wheelchair, but empowered by the perspective it gave her, the empathy it fostered, the courage it required. She became an author, writing children's books about brave princesses who used wheelchairs to roll into adventure rather than away from it. And every year on Lucy's birthday, Robert and Emma would visit her grave, bringing fresh flowers and playing "The Way You Look Tonight" on a small speaker. They would tell her about their latest dance parties, about the families the foundation had helped, about all the ways her brief but brilliant life continued to create ripples of love and healing in a world that desperately needed both. Because Lucy had been right about one final essential truth: love really did live in the happy memories, and when those memories were shared, love multiplied rather than diminished. 7 years old or 70, rich or poor, walking or rolling, everyone had the capacity to plant seeds of hope that would bloom long after they were gone. The little girl with pigtails and a purple coat had taught them all the most important lesson: that the measure of a life isn't found in its length, but in the depth of love it manages to give and receive along the way. And in room 412, somewhere beyond the reach of medical equipment and hospital walls, a 7-year-old princess was still dancing, her laughter echoing through every heart she'd managed to heal. Thank you for joining Emma, Robert, and Lucy on this incredible journey of love, loss, and the courage to keep dancing, despite the music ending too soon.